October 3rd, 1962, 9:12 p.m. Rain fell over Harlem like the sky was trying to wash the city clean. Streetlights reflected off wet pavement. Jazz spilled out of open club doors. Taxi horns echoed between buildings. But inside a quiet black sedan parked across the street from the famous Palm Cafe, a woman sat watching. Waiting. Her name was Evelyn Cross, and before this night was over, she would make the most dangerous decision of her life. Evelyn was not from Harlem. She was not from the streets. She was not someone who understood the rules of men like Bumpy Johnson. She was an undercover reporter from downtown Manhattan, young, brilliant, and obsessed with one thing: writing the story that would make her famous. Not just a good story. Not just a front-page story. A story people would whisper about for decades. And there was only one name powerful enough to give her that. Bumpy Johnson. The king of Harlem. The man politicians feared. The man mobsters respected. The man police could never pin down. For years, newspapers tried to expose him. Every reporter who got close hit the same wall: silence. Nobody talked. Nobody betrayed him. Nobody survived crossing him. But Evelyn believed something dangerous. She believed every man had a weakness. And she thought she had found Bumpy's charm. 3 months earlier, Evelyn had walked into her editor's office and dropped a folder on his desk. "I want Johnson," she said. Her editor almost laughed. "Kid, men with guns follow that man everywhere." "That's why nobody has the real story," Evelyn replied calmly. "What makes you think you can get it?" She looked him dead in the eyes. "Because I won't chase him." She paused. "I'll make him invite me in." Her editor leaned back slowly. "You understand what kind of man he is?" "Yes. He's not some politician you flirt with at a dinner party." "I know. If this goes wrong," he warned, "we won't even know where to look." Evelyn smiled, the kind of smile fearless people wear before stepping off a cliff. "I'll be fine." Those would become famous last words inside the newsroom. Evelyn did not rush. Smart hunters never do. She spent weeks learning everything about Bumpy Johnson. Where he ate, where he played chess, which clubs he preferred, what music he liked, who he trusted, what angered him. She learned he loved poetry. She learned he respected intelligence. But most importantly, she learned he could sense deception faster than most men could sense danger. So she built a new identity. Not a reporter, not a writer, just another educated woman who had recently moved uptown. Someone curious, someone calm, someone who didn't look afraid. Because fear was something Bumpy could smell. The first time she saw him in person was at the Palm Cafe. And suddenly, every rumor made sense. Bumpy Johnson was not physically large. He didn't need to be. Power moved ahead of him like invisible bodyguards. Men straightened when he entered. Waiters moved faster. Conversations lowered. Respect filled the air. He wore a dark, tailored suit and a fedora tilted slightly forward. His eyes were quiet, observant, calculating. The eyes of a man who had survived things most people couldn't imagine. Evelyn watched him laugh at something one of his associates said, and that confused her. Monsters were not supposed to laugh, but that was her first mistake. Bumpy Johnson was never just one thing. He could be generous. He could be ruthless. He could fund a church in the morning and destroy a man by nightfall. You didn't walk up to Bumpy Johnson. People were introduced, carefully, but Evelyn had patience. After 2 weeks of showing up always alone, always composed, she became familiar to the staff. Familiar faces don't trigger alarms. One night, the club owner approached Bumpy quietly. "That woman," he whispered. "She's been coming here often, reads books, tips well, causes no trouble." Bumpy glanced over once. Just once. That was enough. "Have her send over whatever she's drinking," he said calmly. Minutes later, a glass arrived at her table. On a napkin were 4 handwritten words. Evelyn looked at the note, heart racing, hook set, exactly as she planned. She wrote back. Bumpy read it and smiled slightly. Most people tried too hard. This one did not. Interesting. Their first real conversation lasted only 4 minutes, but it changed everything. He approached her table himself, something he rarely did. "You're new," he said. "Yes. You don't look nervous." "Should I be?" He studied her for a moment. Most people avoided eye contact with him. She didn't. Confidence always earned his attention. "What brings you uptown?" he asked. "Curiosity. That can be expensive around here." She smiled, soak in ignorance. For the first time that night, Bumpy laughed. A deep, genuine laugh. His men noticed, because Bumpy Johnson did not laugh easily. "You read?" he asked, nodding toward her book. "Every day. What are you reading now?" "Poetry." Now she had his full attention. Not many people knew how much he loved it. They spoke briefly about Langston Hughes, about Harlem, about ambition. Then Bumpy did something unexpected. He stood. "Next time you come," he said, "sit at my table." And just like that, the door opened. Across the room, one of Bumpy's oldest lieutenants leaned close. "You trust her?" he asked quietly. Bumpy lit a cigarette. "No." "Then why invite her?" He exhaled smoke slowly. "Because people reveal themselves when they think they're in control." He watched Evelyn laugh softly at something the waiter said. "She didn't come here by accident," he added. "You think she's police?" "No." "Then what?" Bumpy's eyes hardened slightly. "Something more patient than police." 2 nights later, an older bartender pulled Evelyn aside. His voice was low. "You seem like a smart lady, so let me give you some advice for free." She listened. "Men have chased stories about that man for 20 years. He leaned closer. Some disappeared chasing them. Evelyn nodded politely, but inside, her ambition was louder than his warning. History never remembered the cautious, only the bold. Back at the newspaper, her editor asked the question again. "You getting close?" Evelyn answered calmly. "He invited me to sit with him." The editor froze. "You're serious?" "Yes." He stared at her like she had just stepped out of a burning building. "Listen to me carefully," he said. "If you feel even a little unsafe, you walk away." She nodded, but she already knew something he didn't. She wasn't walking away from this story. Not now, not ever. October 17th, 10:26 p.m. Evelyn arrived wearing a simple black dress. Elegant, understated, confident, Bumpy noticed immediately. He gestured toward the empty chair beside him. For the next hour, they talked. Not about crime, not about business, but about life, dreams, books, America, power. At one point, Bumpy asked a question that made her pulse jump. "Tell me something true about you." She held his gaze. "I don't scare easily." He studied her face for a long moment. Then he said something she would remember forever. "Everyone scares eventually." He leaned closer. "The smart ones just recognize it early." For the first time, Evelyn felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Not fear, not yet, but awareness. Like standing near the edge of deep water. Near the entrance, 2 men walked in quietly. They did not look like reporters. They did not look like customers. They looked federal. And they were watching Evelyn. Because Evelyn Cross wasn't the only one hunting a story, the FBI had been trying to reach Bumpy for years. And now, they believed they had found their doorway. What nobody realized was that Bumpy Johnson had already noticed them. And when a king notices hunters, the hunt usually ends badly. At 11:03 p.m., Bumpy stood. "Walk with me," he said. Not a request. An invitation. The kind few refused. Evelyn followed him toward a private hallway in the back of the club. Her heart beat faster. This was it. The moment every reporter dreams about. Access. Trust. The story of a lifetime. Behind them, one of the federal agents whispered, "She's in." But what he didn't understand was something Harlem already knew. You don't step into Bumpy Johnson's private world unless he wants you there. And once you step inside, you don't always step back out. And before the night ended, Bumpy Johnson was going to ask Evelyn Cross one question. Just one. A question so precise, it would destroy the life she thought she controlled. 11:07 p.m. The hallway behind the Palm Cafe was narrow and quiet. The music from the club faded with every step Evelyn took behind Bumpy Johnson. Her heels clicked softly against the wooden floor, each sound reminding her that she was walking deeper into a world most people never saw. At the end of the hallway was a staircase. Old, polished, private. Bumpy climbed first. He didn't look back to see if she was following. Men like him never needed to. Either you kept up, or you didn't belong. At the top was a single door. No sign. No guard, but somehow it felt more protected than a bank vault. Bumpy opened it. "After you." The room surprised her. It wasn't flashy. No gold. No expensive paintings. Just order. A large mahogany desk. 2 leather chairs. A bookshelf filled with poetry. philosophy, and history. Langston Hughes, Shakespeare, Frederick Douglass. Evelyn blinked. This was not the office of the monster newspapers described. Bumpy noticed her scanning the titles. People always expect something louder, he said calmly. You read all these? She asked. More than once. He poured 2 glasses of bourbon, handed her one. Their fingers almost touched. She kept her composure, but inside, her pulse was racing. This was closer than any reporter had ever gotten. Closer than her editor would even believe. Bumpy didn't sit right away. Instead, he walked to the window overlooking Lenox Avenue. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Harlem was alive. Always alive. Then he spoke. Tell me something, he said. She waited. When you first came into my club, what were you really looking for? The question landed heavier than it sounded. Evelyn smiled lightly. Good music. Bumpy didn't react. Didn't blink. Didn't smile back. Just silence. Then he took a slow sip of bourbon. You don't strike me as someone who wanders into places without purpose. She tilted her head slightly. Is curiosity a crime? No, he said, but pretending it's harmless usually is. For the first time that night, she felt it. Pressure. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just the quiet weight of a man who missed very little. Still, Evelyn had trained for interviews tougher than this. She shifted smoothly. I like understanding powerful people, she said. Powerful people shape cities. Now Bumpy smiled faintly. Careful, he said. Power isn't something you study safely from a distance. He stepped closer. Eventually, it studies you back. Down in a parked sedan, the 2 federal agents watched the building. Agent Carter checked his watch. She's been up there too long. His partner shrugged. She wanted close. That's close. You think Johnson suspects? His partner gave a quiet laugh. That man suspects rain before clouds form. They kept watching. Neither realized something important. They weren't the only ones watching the street. Across the avenue, 2 men loyal to Bumpy stood under a storefront awning, memorizing faces, license plates, patterns. Because Bumpy Johnson never entered a room without securing the exits first. Evelyn decided to take control again. Interview technique 101. When pressure rises, redirect it. So, tell me something true about you, she said. Bumpy chuckled softly. You first. She hesitated just half a second. Too small for most men to catch. Not too small for him. I believe people are rarely what the world says they are, she answered. Meaning? She met his eyes. I think you're more than the stories. A long pause. Then Bumpy said quietly, Flattery is usually the first tool of someone digging for something. The air shifted. Now there was no mistaking it. This wasn't flirting anymore. This was a chess match. And suddenly, Evelyn realized something uncomfortable. She wasn't sure who was winning. It happened fast. Too fast. She asked it too casually. What do you think your legacy will be? The moment the words left her mouth, Bumpy knew. Ordinary women didn't ask questions like that. Not on a second meeting. Not with that precision. He walked back to his desk slowly, opened a drawer, closed it again. When he looked at her this time, the warmth was gone, replaced by something sharper, older, dangerous. Let me ask you something simpler, he said. Her throat felt dry. When you write about a man, do you decide who he is first? The word hit her ears like a gunshot. Right. Her smile froze. Only for a fraction of a second. But that was enough. Bumpy leaned forward slightly. Relax, he said calmly. If you were police, you wouldn't be here. Silence filled the room. Then he delivered the line that made her stomach drop. But reporters. He paused. Reporters always think they're smarter than the room. Now her heartbeat was loud enough she could hear it. Still, she tried one last pivot. I don't know what you mean. Bumpy walked toward the bookshelf, pulled something out. A folded newspaper. He placed it gently on the desk between them. Her byline stared back at her. She forgot how to breathe. You should know something about Harlem, Bumpy said quietly. We read too. Her mind raced. How long had he known? Since tonight? Since last week? Since the very beginning? You invited me anyway, she whispered. Bumpy nodded once. I like to understand who's studying me. He stepped closer. And why? She felt fear now. Real fear. The kind ambition never prepares you for. Are you going to hurt me? She asked before she could stop herself. Bumpy looked almost disappointed. If I wanted you hurt, he said softly, you would have never made it upstairs. The room fell silent again. But this silence felt different, heavier, final. Then Bumpy moved toward the door and turned the lock. The sound was small, but inside Evelyn's chest, it thundered. She realized something in that moment that reporters never admit. Stories feel very different when you become part of one. Bumpy walked back slowly, studied her, not with anger, with calculation. Now, he said, let's talk about the article you plan to write. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly, because deep down, she already understood something terrifying. This interview was no longer hers, and before the night ended, Bumpy Johnson was going to teach her a lesson reporters would whisper about for decades. Some doors open once, some never open again. The lock clicked softly behind her. Such a small sound, yet it echoed in Evelyn's chest like a drum. For the first time since she started chasing this story, she understood something with perfect clarity. She was no longer the hunter. She was sitting across from the most dangerous man in Harlem. And now he was asking the questions. Bumpy did not speak right away. He returned to his chair, sat down calmly, and lit a cigarette. Slow inhale, slower exhale. Smoke curled between them like a curtain. Evelyn had interviewed politicians who screamed, crime bosses who threatened, and police captains who tried to intimidate her. But this quiet? It was worse, because silence forces truth to surface. Finally, Bumpy spoke. How long? He asked. Her mouth felt dry. 3 months. He nodded once, as if confirming something he already knew. And the plan? He continued. She hesitated. That was her last mistake, because hesitation is a confession without words. You were going to get close, Bumpy said calmly. Gain trust. He tapped ash into a tray. Write something unforgettable. Evelyn swallowed. Yes. Bumpy leaned back. Tell me, in this unforgettable story, he looked directly into her eyes. Was I the villain or the monster? She surprised herself with the answer. I don't know yet. For the first time since the door locked, Bumpy smiled slightly. Honesty always interested him, even when it arrived late. Do you know why you're still sitting comfortably? He asked. She didn't answer. Because if you were just another reporter chasing headlines, he leaned forward, you would have been stopped before you ever learned my favorite drink. Her heart skipped. You've been watching me? A quiet chuckle left his chest. Miss Cross. I've survived this long by watching everything. He began counting on his fingers. The day you first walked into Palm Cafe alone, the books you carried, the questions you never asked out loud, the way you observed exits. Her stomach tightened. Then he delivered the line that made her spine go cold. Even the 2 federal agents parked across the street tonight. Her head snapped up. You saw them? I see everyone who thinks they're invisible. He paused. And I especially notice when someone tries to use my world as a ladder. Agent Carter checked the building again. Still no movement. This isn't right, he muttered. His partner frowned. You want to go in? Knock on Bumpy Johnson's door? Carter said nothing, because they both knew what that meant. Walking into a lion's den and announcing yourself as dinner. Across the avenue, Bumpy's men continued watching them, patient, unbothered. Evelyn straightened her posture. Fear was rising, but she refused to let it show fully. If you knew, she asked carefully, why not stop me sooner? Bumpy's answer came instantly. Because patience reveals character. He stood and walked toward the bookshelf. You weren't digging for gossip, he continued. You were building something bigger. He pulled out one of her previous articles. How corruption hides behind power, he read aloud. Then he closed it. You don't write small stories. She felt a strange mix of pride and dread. Tell me something, he said. If that article destroyed me, what would it give you? She answered without thinking. The truth. Bumpy shook his head slowly. No. He stepped closer. It would give you fame. The word hit harder than she expected, because it was true. Then something unexpected happened. Bumpy poured her another drink. His hands were steady, controlled. Not angry, not rushed. Relax, he said. If I punished every person who tried to write about me, he gave a faint shrug. Harlem would be very quiet. She blinked. You're not going to hurt me. It wasn't a question. He held her gaze. That depends. On what? On whether you came here for truth? He leaned slightly closer. Or for blood. The room felt smaller now, air heavier. She chose her next words carefully. I wanted to understand the man people fear. A long pause followed. Then Bumpy said something few ever heard from him. Fear is cheap. She frowned slightly. Respect is what costs. Minutes passed. And slowly, Evelyn noticed something strange. He wasn't threatening her. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't even insulting her. He was studying her, like a teacher deciding whether a student was worth the lesson. Let me tell you something about reporters, Bumpy said. They think exposure equals power. He tapped the desk gently. But real power, tap, is deciding what never gets exposed. Her pulse quickened again, because now she understood something terrifying. If Bumpy wanted that article buried, it would never see daylight. Not through threats, not through violence, through influence, pressure, disappearing sources, closed doors, stories killed before ink touched paper. You could stop it, she whispered. I could, he said simply. The honesty stunned her. Then why haven't you? Bumpy looked toward the rain-streaked window. When I was younger, I thought control meant crushing every threat. He turned back. Age teaches you something better. What? Sometimes you don't crush a threat. He held her gaze. You transform it. He walked to the door, but did not unlock it. Not yet. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, heavier. Miss Cross, do you know why Harlem trusts me? She shook her head slowly. Because when wolves circled this neighborhood, his eyes hardened. I circled back. For every cruel story written about me, he continued, there are families who slept safely because of decisions I made. She saw it then. Not softness, not kindness, but a code, a ruthless man, with lines he did not allow others to cross. Then came the question that shifted the entire night. So tell me, Bumpy said quietly, when you write this story. He stepped closer. Will you tell all of it? Her heart pounded, because suddenly, this wasn't about survival anymore. It was about truth. And truth is heavier than fear. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed faintly in the hallway outside. One of Bumpy's men knocked once. Urgent. Bumpy opened the door halfway. A whisper passed between them. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the change in his face. Not panic. Never panic. Just sharpened attention. He closed the door again, looked directly at her. It seems, he said calmly, your federal friends are getting impatient. Her stomach dropped. They can't come up here. They won't, he said. But their presence tells me something. What? That this story, his eyes darkened slightly, is bigger than ambition. A beat of silence. Then he delivered the sentence Evelyn would remember for the rest of her life. Now I have to decide what message your article was meant to send. He stepped closer. And what message I'm going to send back. Outside, thunder rolled across Harlem, and Evelyn realized something with terrifying certainty. This night was no longer about journalism. It was about consequence. And before sunrise, someone's future was going to disappear. By sunrise, Elena could not pretend anymore. She was no longer just observing Bumpy Johnson. She was inside his world. And once you stepped inside that world, walking out was never simple. The next afternoon, she returned to the Lenox Lounge. But this time something felt different. Men watched her. Not openly, not rudely, but carefully, like guards watching someone walk too close to a cliff. When she entered the back office, Bumpy was already there. Reading. Always reading. A thick book rested in his hands. He did not look up. He simply said, You stayed. Elena sat down slowly. Yes. A pause. Then Bumpy closed the book. His eyes studied her face longer than usual. You are writing something, he said. It was not a question. Elena's heart jumped. Every instinct told her to lie. But something about Bumpy made lies feel dangerous. So she chose a careful half-truth. I write about power, about people who shape cities. Bumpy nodded once. Good writers survive by knowing when to stop writing. The words landed heavy. Was it advice? Or a warning? She could not tell. That evening, Elena returned to her apartment and finally began the article. Her fingers moved fast across the typewriter. She wrote about his discipline, his intelligence, his ruthlessness, the fear he inspired, but also something unexpected, the strange respect people held for him, the way shop owners smiled when his name was mentioned, the way mothers whispered, As long as Bumpy runs Harlem, nobody hurts our children. The article was explosive. If published, it would make her career overnight. but it would also expose the deepest workings of Harlem's underground. When she finished the first draft, she leaned back. Her hands trembled. She knew this story could destroy him. And powerful men did not forgive destruction. 2 nights later, she met her editor in secret. A diner downtown, far from Harlem. He read the pages silently, then looked up, stunned. My God, Elena, this is bigger than anything we've ever printed. You need to pull back, he continued. This isn't just a gangster story. This is political, dangerous. Elena's voice stayed calm. Dangerous stories are the only ones worth telling. Her editor lowered his voice. Does he know? No. Good, he whispered. Because if he finds out before this goes to print, you might not get a second chance. But Harlem had ears everywhere, and secrets did not stay buried long. 3 days later, while Elena walked down Lenox Avenue, she noticed the car. Black. Parked too long. Engine running. When she turned the corner, it rolled forward slowly, matching her pace. Her stomach tightened. She quickened her steps. So did the car. Then suddenly, it pulled beside her. The window lowered. Inside sat one of Bumpy's quiet men. The kind who never spoke unless necessary. He looked straight ahead, nodded her. Mr. Johnson would like to see you, he said. No anger, no emotion, just certainty. Elena's throat went dry. Now? She asked. The driver nodded once. She understood immediately. This was not a request. The ride felt longer than it was. No one spoke. When they arrived, it was not the Lenox Lounge. It was a private brownstone. Silent. Curtains drawn. Inside, the air felt still. Heavy. Like the house itself was holding its breath. Bumpy stood near the window, hands behind his back, watching the street below. He did not turn when she entered. Miss Torres, he said calmly. Tell me something. Elena tried to steady herself. Yes? Do you believe a person can sit at a lion's table and the lion not notice what they're eating? Her pulse thundered. He knew, or at least, he suspected. I don't understand, she said carefully. Now he turned, slowly. In his hand was a single sheet of paper, typed, her typed words, her article. Every drop of blood left her face. You write beautifully, Bumpy said, not angry, not shouting, which was somehow far more terrifying. He stepped closer, each footstep quiet, measured. Do you know why betrayal hurts more than bullets? He asked softly. Elena could barely breathe. No, because bullets come from enemies. He placed the paper on the table between them. Betrayal comes from someone you let get close. The room felt smaller, the walls tighter. I never betrayed you, she whispered. Bumpy studied her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally, you walked into my world under a false name. You asked questions no innocent woman asks. You wrote truths that could start wars. His voice lowered. So tell me, what would you call that? Tears burned her eyes, not from fear alone, but from something heavier. Guilt. Because somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a story. I was doing my job, she said. And now, Bumpy replied quietly, I must do mine. Silence swallowed the room. She realized something then. No one else was inside the house. No laughter. No music. No movement upstairs. Just them. And the ticking of a distant clock. Elena forced the question out. What happens now? Bumpy walked back toward the window. For a long time he did not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that chilled her bones. That depends, he said. On whether you came here as a reporter. He turned slowly, eyes sharp as winter. Or whether you walked in as something much worse. Elena's lips trembled. And what is worse than a reporter? Bumpy's gaze hardened. A spy. The word echoed through the silent house. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere far away. Inside, there was no escape. Bumpy stepped closer one final time and asked the question that made her heart nearly stop. Who else have you been talking to, Miss Torres? Elena realized the terrifying truth. This was no longer about an article. This was about survival. And in Bumpy Johnson's world, not everyone who entered the room ever left it. The word spy still hung in the air. Elena felt it pressing against her chest like a weight. I am not a spy, she said, her voice shaking despite her effort to stay calm. Bumpy did not respond immediately. He simply watched her. studied the tiny movements people could not control, breathing, blinking, the tremble in their hands. Then he walked to the table and tapped the article softly. "One lie," he said quietly, "always drags another behind it." "I told the truth in that article," she whispered. "That is exactly the problem," Bumpy replied. "Truth, in the wrong hands, could burn down entire neighborhoods." He nodded once toward the hallway. The door opened. 2 men stepped in. Between them was a third man, Agent Carter. His suit was wrinkled now, his confidence gone. For the first time since Elena met him, he looked small. Her eyes widened. "You followed me," she breathed. Carter avoided her gaze. Bumpy spoke calmly. "No one follows anything in Harlem without me knowing." He stepped closer to Carter. "You parked across Lenox 3 nights in a row," Bumpy continued. "You asked questions about my clubs. You paid a bartender who already works for me." Carter swallowed hard. "So let's stop pretending." Bumpy's voice dropped lower. "You didn't send her just for a story." The silence that followed was unbearable. Finally, Carter spoke. "We were building a case.